In the center of Heracles' myth cycle are the 12 labors, called athloi in Greek. Now, our hero performed these labors at Hera's command in the service of King Eurystheus of Argos. So I have a confession to make. There is no way to completely explain a myth. A myth is just a story which gets better and better the more you retell it. But for sure, a story can have hidden dimensions or underlying meanings. Some of these meanings can lay hidden for centuries and millennia. And it often takes our modern mindset and modern research methods to fully decipher the meanings of some of these ancient stories. I'll actually leave a link in the description below for a video that I did on the origins of myth. Take a look at it if you want a deep dive on the nature and typology of mythological stories. Heracles' first labor was the capture of the Nemean lion. Now, the Nemean lion was a large lion ravaging the countryside around Nemea, whose hide was impervious to weapons. King Eurystheus commanded Heracles to destroy the beast as the first of his 12 labors. The hero cornered the lion in its cave and, seizing it by the neck, wrestled it to death. He then skinned its hide to make a lion skin cape, one of Heracles' most distinctive attributes. It's likely that the lion-killing motif is adapted from Oriental prototypes which drew on the lion's status as a noble adversary. This is the lion hunt of Ashurbanipal of the Palace of Nineveh, which depicts the Assyrian king pitted in combat with captured Asian lions. The earliest certain attestation of the invulnerability motif in literature comes actually from a victory ode by the poet Bacchylides for a victor in the Pancration at the Nemean Games.
With all kinds of skill, Perseus' descendant sets his neck-breaking hand on the flesh-eating lion. For glittering, man-taming bronze refuses to pierce its unapproachable body, and his sword was bent back.
The second labor was the Hydra of Lerna. The Hydra was a swamp monster, a gigantic, multi-headed water serpent. According to Hesiod, the Hydra was the offspring of Typhon and Echidna. She had 9 or possibly more heads. Possibly one was immortal, but they all grew back if they were hacked off. Whatever the amount of heads, it was only with the aid of his trusty helper Iolaus that Heracles was able to apply burning brands to the severed stumps and cauterize the wounds to prevent the regeneration. Lerna was a very old Mycenaean settlement and actually reputed to be one of the entrances to the underworld. This is perhaps because of the sinkholes, underground caves, and lakes which characterize the region. Unfortunately, they have completely dried up by around the 1800s. The third labor was the Kyrenetian Hind. Definitely not as monstrous as the first 2 labors, the hind was a golden-horned deer sacred to the goddess Artemis. After chasing the animal for a full year, Heracles finally captured it on Mount Artemision in Arcadia. According to some sources, the hind was one of the 5 golden-horned deer gifted to Artemis by the nymph Taygetus, a woman named for an important mountain range just outside of Sparta. This Taygetus is a daughter of the Titan Atlas, who, again according to Pindar, was once herself turned into a deer by the goddess in order to escape Zeus's amorous advances. The animal definitely has some odd anatomy. Female deer do not have horns. Some have said that this means that the tale is a remnant of Heracles' northern Dorian roots, and the story itself is a kernel of a northern European tale about the hunting of a female reindeer who would have horns. Others have argued for an allegory of the river Kyrenetian, where the horns would represent sort of branches of the river. Still others want to read the myth as the aiteion, or the reason why female deer don't have horns. The fourth labor was the Erymanthian boar. The Erymanthian boar was a gigantic boar which ravaged the farmlands of Psophis in western Arcadia. After chasing the boar through the deep winter snows of Mount Erymanthus, Heracles netted it and brought it back alive to his master Eurystheus. The king, terrified at the sight of the deadly beast, leapt into a buried jar, specifically a Pythos jar, for safety. This is a strange, funny, and very common image on archaic and classical pottery. Just like the Assyrian lion, boars were prestigious prey for an aristocratic hunter. The image foregrounds Heracles' heroic qualities and contrasts him with his weak and cowardly master. The fifth labor was the stables of Augeas, one of my favorite myths. Now, Augeas was a king in Elis in the western Peloponnesus who possessed an enormous herd of cattle. Heracles was commanded by King Eurystheus to clean Augeas' stables, and the hero accomplished this by diverting the waters of a river through the stables. Our sources actually disagree on exactly which rivers Heracles diverted to achieve his task. The act was impossible and demeaning, but rerouting rivers was not unheard of in Heracles' myths. There was a legend that Heracles created the largest lake in southern Greece, the Copaic Basin, when he flooded the area by digging out a different river, the Kephissus, which poured into the basin. The Mycenaean citadel of Gla and the Copaic basin give context for Heracles' Peloponnesian water engineering exploits. Gla was a huge fortified Mycenaean citadel. Much of the area within the walls of the citadel is actually vacant, leading archaeologists to believe that it served as a refuge for farmers in the event of an attack. In the Mycenaean period, Lake Copais had been drained by a system of late Bronze Age dams and canals. This is one of the most astonishing achievements of prehistoric engineering. This construction project happened at about the same time as the erection of Gla, the citadel which controlled the large fertile plain of the basin. The drainage system collapsed from destruction or neglect at the end of the Mycenaean civilization at the late Bronze Age, and this allowed the lake to re-emerge. It was drained again for a second time in the 19th century and remains dry today. The sixth labor was the Stymphalian birds. The birds were an enormous flock of large crane-like birds which gathered at a lake near the town of Stymphalus in Arcadia. Arriving at the lake, which was deep in the woods, Heracles had no idea how to drive the huge gathering of birds away. The goddess Athena came to his aid, providing a pair of bronze crotala, which were noise-making clappers similar to castanets. Ancient interpretations of this event include claims that the birds could reflect problems in the area caused by malaria-bearing dampness or even mosquitoes, which is relevant to the area today. Another source claims that the castanets represent the noise of water falling down limestone sinkholes. The seventh labor was the Cretan bull. The Cretan bull, like the Kyrenetian Hind and the Erymanthian Boar, needed to be captured and showed to King Eurystheus. The animal itself was a large bull sent forth from the sea by Poseidon. This bull has been variously identified with the famous Cretan bulls of mythology, Zeus and Europa, the Minotaur, and Pasiphae's bull. Unfortunately, as it happens, upon his completion of this task, Heracles set the creature free and eventually it found its way to the Athenian town of Marathon, where it laid waste to the countryside. And it was the Athenian hero Theseus, that cut-price Heracles, who ended up killing the Cretan bull once and for all. The eighth labor was the mares of Diomedes. Diomedes, not the Iliadic Diomedes, was a barbaric king of the Bistonian tribe in Thrace. He fed his huge and violent female horses or mares on a diet of human flesh. When Heracles was sent to fetch these horses, he captured the beasts alive and left them in the care of his young squire Abderos while he went off to deal with the king Diomedes. Upon his return, Heracles discovered the boy had been killed and eaten by the mares. In anger, Heracles fed the horses their master's corpse, which stifled and sated their appetite for human flesh. Some sources rationalize the man-eating element simply as the great expense of keeping horses. The mangers of the horses were also made of bronze, and this detail could perhaps point to Thracian metal mines in which many enslaved foreigners did die working. The ninth labor was the girdle or belt of the Amazon queen. Heracles' battle with the famous Amazons takes him even further afield than Thrace. The capital of the Amazons, Themyscira, was supposedly situated on the mouth of the river Thermodon on the Black Sea. The queen in question was Hippolyta, and daughter of the god Ares and of a lady named Otrera. Now the Amazons were a mythical race of female warriors who lived far to the north. Their name means missing one breast. This is because an Amazon's right breast got in the way when she threw a spear or shot an arrow. According to some sources, Heracles kills Hippolyta in the process of getting the belt. Stories and depictions of the Amazons were very popular in ancient Greece as a pretty simplistic metaphor for the victory of Greek civilization over the incursions and dangers of Eastern barbarity. The 10th labor was the red cattle of Geryon. Geryon was a three-bodied, four-winged giant who lived on the island of Erythea in the westernmost reach of the earth-encircling river Oceanus, or ocean. He possessed a beautiful herd of red cattle, and it was these cattle Heracles was sent to fetch back. Heracles reached the island by sailing across Oceanus in a golden cup borrowed from the sun god Helios. There he saw, encountered, and slew first the cattle herder Eurytion, then his two-headed guard dog Orthus, and finally three-bodied Geryon himself. Geryon's only role in Greek myth is to be Heracles' adversary. In spite of Geryon's monstrous figure, he strangely does not represent a significantly dangerous opponent for our hero. Heracles takes him down with a single shot of his bow. The Geryon labor has been interpreted in many different ways. Because of the distance of travel and the need for a magical vehicle, along with some details such as crossing of water and the many-headedness of Orthos, the story can be, and has been, seen as a variation on the mythological motif of journey to the end of the world and back. Some others have linked the red cattle, phoinakes, as well as the name Erythea, erythos is another kind of red, with a red-purple dye much prized by Phoenician traders, made from a special kind of lichen, Rochella tinctoria. This kind of lichen grows in the Canary Islands to the west of the Mediterranean. The 11th labor is the quest for the apples of the Hesperides. The Hesperides, goddesses or nymphs and their glowing golden apples, were regarded as the source of the golden light of sunset, a phenomenon which is also thought to celebrate the marriage of Zeus and Hera, the king and queen of heaven. In their care of the tree of the golden apples at the edge of the earth, they were assisted by a 100-headed guardian dragon. Sometimes Heracles sends the titan Atlas to fetch the apples on his behalf, while he, Heracles, did Atlas's task, the holding up of the heavens. In other versions, it's just Heracles who slays the serpent guardian of the apples and fetches them himself. The paradise-like garden of the Hesperides was most often located on a mythical island in the extreme west, near the titan Atlas. However, it could also be in Libya, in the Atlantic, or in the land of the Hyperboreans, thought to be to the far northwest in Thrace. Their garden is a kind of paradise. We're actually told by one source that the golden apples had been given by Earth as a wedding present at the marriage of Hera and Zeus. The 12th labor is the capture of the dog of Cerberus. Cerberus was the guard dog of the underworld who signaled and prevented any unauthorized entry into or departure from the realm of the dead. There are a variety of opinions regarding Cerberus's appearance, especially the kind and number of his heads. It could be anywhere from 3 to 50 to 100. Most literary sources describe him as having 4 legs with 3 dogs' heads and also bearing numerous serpents' heads at the neck and throat. While Cerberus is being pulled by Heracles to the upper world, his spittle dropping onto the earth is the origin story for the poisonous plant, the foxglove. Just like Persephone and Orpheus, Heracles' journey to the underworld can be read pretty simply as an allegory for the overcoming of death. Both the Geryon task and the apples task have elements of this in them, but it is much more overt with Heracles' triumphant return to the upper world with the terrible 3-headed dog in tow. That's all of Heracles' labors. It's not all of his mythological exploits, not by a long shot, but that's where we're going to leave it today. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you liked this video, if you found it entertaining or informative, please do leave a like and subscribe. It would help me out very much, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. See you later.